You're listening to That Music Podcast with Bryson Tarvin, the curriculum designer and educational consultant behind That Music Teacher and the Elementary Music Summit. Each week, Bryson and his guests will dive into the reality of being an elementary music teacher and how music can truly be transformative in the lives of the students you serve. Show notes and resources mentioned in this episode can be found at thatmusicteacher.com.
Hello and welcome back to That Music Podcast. I'm excited to welcome Rainy Barton back to the podcast. We are going to be chatting about folk dances, movement, activities, all these wonderful things that are so helpful at the end of the year, especially. So Rainy, I'm so thankful for this conversation. I can't wait to see what we can get into.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's been a hot minute since we've gotten to chat, so it'll be a good time.
I know, and it feels like there's so much that's gone on in that time. So speaking of, can you share us a little bit about your background, kind of your experience, especially when if kind of talking about incorporating folk dances, play parties, and other movement activities in your classroom?
Yeah. So I've been teaching music now for 9 years, which blows my mind. It's been 9 years already, but time goes fast. And I actually went from public to private, which has been a big shift as in itself, but that's been actually really great. So I've been at my current school for 3 years. And as far as, and I teach elementary music and middle school theater now. So that's a big fun fact. Anyway. As far as folk dances and stuff go, I've always tried since the beginning to incorporate movement into my lessons. Before I even knew about folk dances, we were always doing some sort of movement thing because I know that my students focus better when they get the wiggles out. And there's all those millions of research studies that say that if you move, their students are just more engaged, they're more focused, they're better at listening. So I knew that from the get-go, but I really discovered my love for folk dances at our annual music teacher conference. The Amadons were there and they did a play party folk dance night as the big mixer for the night, and that was the best thing I've ever done. I was obsessed. We did a million dances, and they are just the coolest, cutest little couple ever that teaches folk dances. And so we had a blast. And then after that, I immediately wanted to put all of that into my classroom, which of course got very mixed reviews because my students were like, "You're telling me to sashay what? And to promenade what? What are you talking about?" And I didn't know any idea of how to actually teach it and what grade levels to do what dances. So or where to get the quality music. I didn't really know anything. I just knew I wanted to do it. And going into, it was also when I had just started going to my first school ever. And so the older kids were not really mine yet because, you have to take a couple years to make it your own. So it was just a whole thing. But I kept trying and I kept doing every folk dance session or workshop I could find that was near me to just learn a lot more because I really did want it to actually work in my classroom because when I did have success, it was really great and the students were all engaged and it was fabulous. And then I just one day threw a folk dance into my first day of school lessons for every grade level, and that really worked. I don't know if that was if it was because I chose the right folk dance or whatever it was, but I was just we're just going to do this at the beginning of the year and you're just going to know that you come in my classroom and that's a precedent. It's just going to be a thing. And that really worked. And so I just rolled with it. And then I keep doing it now and we do at least 2 folk dances a month per grade level. And it's just the best thing ever. So I feel that was very winded, but
I echo a lot of that. I always have been really into movement. But not really sure what that was going to look like. And then when I started, I think Andrew Ellising was the first person I saw do a folk dance session, and it was
I love him.
He's great. It was just great being able to see not only just this is how this goes, but also the process. Because let's be honest, we might get into this a little bit later. There are a bunch of wonderful books, some of them even by the Amadons, that you can read about doing a play party or doing a folk dance, but it's so much easier and so much more meaningful to learn it by doing it, which is why those sessions are so invaluable. So you briefly talked about some of the benefits you've noticed, but really kind of what are the reasons that you keep doing folk dances? What are some of the things that you think your students are getting out of it and why they're important?
I mean, there's so many reasons. I mean, one is I like them and I'm not going to do stuff in my classroom that I don't enjoy just to like check off a box. Like, I know there's so many concepts like we have to teach and so many things, but like, if I'm not liking what I'm doing, then the students are going to like feed off of that. And they're going to be like, well, why should we care if Miss Barton doesn't? So since I have so much fun with them and I'm just like having the best time, I feel like that feeds into the whole experience for them. But I also feel like there's just so many benefits, as in there's like more confidence in students, like especially in like those students that like maybe at home, like they have to be quiet all the time. And like they're not allowed to like express themselves because they come from like really rough backgrounds. Like you don't know what your students are dealing with at home. And like I feel like the music room is like the perfect space to be like, no, like you can be free, you can dance, you can sing, like you can be the whole part of yourself that maybe you don't get to share with the rest of the world. And I've seen like really quiet students really excel in folk dancing. And so that's been really great. And then across the board, like I already said, like student engagement is normally better. I honestly don't really get that many kids that are not about it, because if they're not, everyone else is just like, can you just get with the program? Like, come on, we're sashaying, like get with it. And they all just end up doing it. And then, community, team building, like all those sorts of things are just great benefits that I've seen, and having to learn to work with a partner that maybe you wouldn't necessarily pair up with, because when you have partner dances where they switch partners, like you can't predict who you're going to get, and you just have to flow with it and know that like in the end of it all, it's really like a minute of dancing with that person, so like you can survive, right? But yeah, I just feel like them having a blast and just building all those social skills and things that are so important, and just really being able to express themselves is the ultimate reason. But I feel like there's like a million reasons as to why.
Yeah, I also I agree with that, where there's so many different facets of why these can be so helpful. I mean, I one thing that has really proven true for me over the last couple of years, as we started coming out of COVID, where we weren't able to be anywhere near each other. We had to be 6 feet apart, and we weren't able to do any of these things. Students didn't learn how to interact with each other. They didn't learn how to. I mean, it seems kind of basic, but some of these students, especially if they hadn't experienced pre-COVID school, they didn't know how to move through space with each other, because they had so much space between them because of all the restrictions. So I've noticed that doing folk dances and play parties and things like that really make it so much, it really kind of walks them through that process in a way that's not just talking about expectations or talking about working together or talking about listening, but actually like doing it all so natively, and so kind of as a byproduct rather than the focus.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. I just really have seen a lot of just great things come out of it. And I mean, I feel like a million times I could just say this. Yeah, it's just my favorite thing. Honestly, I like doing folk dances more than any other thing in my classroom. So I feel like I'm known as the folk dance person now, because my band director came in the other day and he was like, so what rig are we learning today, or what reel, or what jig? And I was like, oh, you're welcome to join anytime.
I love that. So
Yeah.
you kind of bring us really nicely into our next question, which is, how do you choose what to do? I mean, let's be honest, there are millions of folk dances, at least, that have existed at some point in throughout time, and a lot of them have still continued or have been shared that are still available. How do you choose the ones that are really going to fit the age and the ability level of the students that you have in front of you?
So that definitely is a lot of trial and error. Like I had a lot of flops. Like a lot of times I was like, oh, this is going to be great. And then, it turned into a dumpster fire and you're just trying to recalibrate from there. So there was a lot of trial and error. And it was just things like either I didn't teach it well, or the dance was too complicated for where my students actually were in their ability. But I have also had successes when pushing my students to do dances that might be outside of their normal like ability, but that's only possible now because I've exposed them to so much to folk dance. It's like second nature to them, but that was not the normal thing. However, I usually will assess the difficulty of like a dance by like the following things. I look at like what dance formation it is, because circle and long way sets are just traditionally easier for students because most of them repeat. If anything, like they might not do the exact same order, but like they do the same thing essentially. So that's the first thing I look at. And then I also look at like how many sections there are and like what is the form, because if it's like that you do this and then you do this and then you go here and then you go here and there's like all these moving parts, I'm like, okay, well, like that's probably an older student dance, because only younger students can only retain so much and it's just going to confuse them. And then I also think about like what dance terminology does it include. Like I don't want to throw too much at them all at once. Like if they're in kindergarten and they've never done anything, like I'm probably not going to pick one that goes like sachet and promenade and do-si-do and elbow circle and down the line and skaters hold and like all these traditional terms. They're going to be like, I don't know which way is up, essentially. So those are normally the things that let me like figure out how it is. But I also just try things out. Like I think it's called a Virginia reel with my second graders the other day. And that routine, that's actually a harder one that I've seen most people say 4 through 5 do. And I was like, well, I'm going to do a second because I think they can do it. And I will say there was one part that I was like, maybe I proved myself wrong. But they pulled it together at the end and it was fabulous. And it was just a great time. So I don't always even follow the recommended age range if there is one, because most of the time there's not. It just is a folk dance and you just have to figure it out. But yeah, it really just depends on your students. And I feel like most teachers will know or have some sort of idea, but also it's just like a time to experiment and to see. But I feel like those 3 things to think about: the dance, what formation is it, how many sections, and what terminology does it have, is like a great beginning point for that.
That's really practical, but a way that I've also looked at it is kind of thinking about when you get a new piece of music and you're trying to say, all right, well, would this be a good fit for this class, or whatever? We break it down into what they know and what they don't know, right? It's kind of like we don't want it to be nothing that they know. We want to have them some basis, but we also don't want it to be all the things they know. So finding that final balance, and just like you said, even if they don't necessarily know all the concepts already, that doesn't mean they won't be successful. It just means that if they already have experience with some of these foundational soft skills, then it will likely be easier, which I think is something that you also mentioned, that you often learn what's going to work by having some epic fails along the way.
Oh, yes.
But you know what? It happens and it's part of the process, and it's a great way to say, all right, well, maybe not now, maybe another time. So I would love to talk about the successes as well. So when things go well, at least, what does a typical lesson or activity in your classroom look like, especially when you're doing these folk dances or play parties or any other sort of movement?
Yeah, so if they go successfully, what normally happens is if I introduce a new folk dance in the classroom, I do try to break it down. I used to try to do it all in one class, and then I was like, Rainy, they do not need to be doing dance for 30 minutes. Like that is just ridiculous. Yeah. And students, their time span or their attention span is like whatever it is, their age plus 5, I don't remember, but it's not long. It's not long enough for 30 minutes. So now I break it down into 2 classes, sometimes 3. It depends how long it is. Because I don't have to learn it all in one sitting. I guess had it in my head like, oh, well, it's not a success if they don't, but honestly, it's just better in the long run if I break it down. And I don't, like I said, want the entire lesson to be one activity. And then I start by just introducing the dance. I always try to make sure I know the origin of the dance, because I want the students to know, like, hey, we're learning a dance from like the Caribbean this week, or like we're learning a dance from the British Isles, or wherever it is. I also try to find a fun fact about wherever the place is, because I think that's just fun. And my students are like, oh, look at this fun fact. I feel like some of them don't care, but I like it, so I'm going to keep it. But then we start breaking it down section by section. What I found, and I can't remember who told me that they do this. I think it was Matthew Stensrid, who I absolutely love. He's like fabulous. Yes. What did he say? Oh yeah. He tries to show his students a video of the dance if possible, like before they do it. Just because there's some students that need that. And they're just like, okay, what are you about to have me do? Like, I need to know where the end process is. And that's really helpful. Some of them don't care. And I don't always do it all the time. Like, cause most of the time I mean, unless, well, actually, no. A lot of the time there is a video because the bow tie music person is fabulous on YouTube. Most of the time there's a video, but not for all the cultural ones, the ones not from the Amadon. So there's not as many. But I'll try to show a video if I can. And then we just, that builds up the excitement a little bit more. And then we just go from there. And then we see where we left off on the next class. And then we put it all together at the end with music. And then, then the class after that, I will always just run it again as like a beginning, like warm up, like, all right, let's get our movement in our bodies and off to the races. And then we put that one away for later and then we move on.
Yeah, I will say being able to see people do it is so helpful. I mean, I'm such a visual learner. Like I have pretty much all of the Amadon books, but sometimes I'm like, what are they saying? What are these words?
I don't even know.
And I'm just, so I literally, bow tie music, so many of my folk dances from the Amadons, I've just like go on YouTube and find it. And I think it's a great idea to bring that into your students too, because one, that can kind of get them excited to see like, this is there's an end goal of this. We're not just doing these random steps. We're going somewhere, but also it lets them kind of see that bird's eye view, which I think is why sometimes we can struggle on those formations that aren't a long way set or a circle, because they are so nebulous when you're looking at it from your space rather than kind of that bird's eye view.
Yeah, for sure.
So when we start talking about folk dances and play parties, especially when we start doing them with older kids, we're probably going to get some pushback from some teachers that are going to say, my kids would never, or you have them connect hands. Well, see, I even say connect hands because you have them hold hands. Like,
yeah, I know.
How do you create an environment that's positive and that allows this and allows them to be comfortable with what they're comfortable with, but also pushing them a little outside of their comfort zone at the same time? How do you do that? How do you really kind of balance that fine line?
Honestly, that's the hardest thing, isn't it? I don't even feel like I've 100% mastered it at this point. Like I feel like I was too harsh in the beginning and then I was like too lax in the middle. And then I was like, okay, we have to have like a happy medium, because it's like you said, like you don't want to be like pushing them past their comfort zone to where they're uncomfortable, but you also don't want to just let them have their way if they really could just get it together. So it's been a little tricky. The things that I have noticed is my biggest tip is don't call it a dance. Do not call it a dance, because your older kids do not want to dance. At least some of them do, because, some of them probably take dance and some of them just like to dance. But also when you say dance, you're not thinking of the folk dance. Like that's not what you're thinking of if you're a little kid. So I don't say that. I usually just have them get into whatever formation it is in. And then I just say for our next activity, and I just start teaching it and it's off to the races. And then, by the middle, they're like, this is a folk dance again. And I'm like, well, we're already doing it. So you're fine. So that's one thing. But as far as the partner thing, because I feel like that was the partner thing and the holding hands thing, like you said, has been the hardest thing, because especially for partners, like, kids want to be with who they want to be with, and they don't want to be with who they don't want to be with. And then you don't want that one kid that, maybe might stand out a little bit. Maybe they're having difficulty with like connecting and making friends. Like you don't want that student to be feeling like no one ever wants to be their partner. And so I've tried really hard over the years, one, to be like, well, first I have a partner zone in my class, or partnerless zone in my classroom, so that if you don't have a partner, you go over there immediately. So I'm like, because I'm sick of kids coming up to me saying, I don't have a partner. I'm like, I don't got time for this. So I'm like, go to the partner zone, you know where you're going. And then if one person goes over there and like, that's it because everyone else has a partner, then like I'll be their partner. But if another person goes over there, I don't care. You guys are being partners. And I don't want to hear any ifs, ands, or buts about it. And if they come up to me later, I'm like, guys, it's the one dance. You can do it. I promise. So I've tried really hard to do that. And that's been mostly successful. We've also just talked about the fact that like this is like a moment in time, and that in like another moment you'll be in math class, and in another moment you'll be in PE, and another moment you'll be eating dinner. So like it's a moment, it's fleeting. So let's just like take it and not make it bigger than it is. And then and also the holding hand thing, as far as that goes, I've tried a couple of things. At first I was like, you're just going to do it. And that's just going to be it. And then that was not working because, there are really some kids that are just like, I don't want to touch others. Like, I don't know how to do this. So I've tried a couple things. I've tried scarves for those kids. If they need to hold scarves with one person holds one scarf or one end, one person holds the other, like, sure, that has worked before. I also have a hand sanitizer thing literally at the front of my classroom, and like they don't even have to ask, like if they just want to go up and get hand sanitizer after, before, whenever, like it's always there, and I let them know that. And so some kids just do that instead, like they don't necessarily like holding hands, but they know they can just go wash their hands or whatever after, and that's been helpful. The other thing I've done scarves, I've done hand sanitizer. I feel like there was one more thing I did for that. Just changing the actions per se. So like, for example, when you sashay down, like an alley or something, you're holding hands with the person, you're staring at them and you're like dancing down. I'll like let them do the do-si-do hands positions, which is typically where you just cross your arms in front of you and they're still facing their partner and they're still dancing down together. They're just not actually touching. So I've tried things like that before, just to be like, you're still doing the actions and you're still with your partner, but like if you really can't touch, then that's the thing. However, I will get on a student if I see, like, if it's a mixed partner dance, I see them do that with one partner and then not with the other. I'm like, okay, well, if we're not going to touch hands with one person, then we're not going to touch hands with anyone. So we're not going to do like oh, you're my friend, so I'll touch you. You're not my friend. So I'm like, no, we need to have some respect and decency in that area. So those are the things I've tried. But each student is their own entity, and some just don't care about any of those suggestions. But I've tried my best.
I love what you said about the partner zone, because I've always done it where they just raise their hand. But then when you get people that are just like raising their hand and staring at each other and not solving the problem. So I love that. But I also, I've also gone kind of back and forth on the hand thing. First of all, I always use the phrase, I don't know who taught me this, it's not mine. I've always used the phrase connect your hands, or connect the circle, rather than hold hands. That alone is huge.
I love that.
That's been a huge thing. But one thing that I felt, it's one of those things where, the more you do it and the more you do it, the younger they're going to get comfortable. So I started doing these folk dances and things like that. And I was starting to feel really confident in the fact that I also have the hand sanitizer, that I'm like, all right, we have, everyone is really, most people are, it's pretty much set up for success, and we can modify it if it's different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I really like pandemic. When we had a global pandemic and the kids weren't allowed to touch each other. And I was like, I spent all this time telling them they didn't have cooties, and now we have this whole thing. So it definitely did require a lot of unworking that, undoing that. But I think, again, just being aware of the comfort level of your kids. You don't want to push them too far, but you also want them to understand that, like, sometimes you have to get a little bit uncomfortable, and, we're doing this for a reason. And again, give them a choice. If you want to do a scarf, use a scarf. If you want to use hand sanitizer, use hand sanitizer. But those are your choices. I think it's a great way to do some differentiation there.
I really like what you said about having the kids at a younger age doing it, because it's a total exposure thing. Like, if you don't expose them to like having to connect hands or doing these types of dances or things until like they're older, like there's really no hope there. Like, they're going to be like, what are you trying to have me do? Whereas if you're introducing it, like you said, from like the younger age, like it just becomes the norm, which is great. And then the partner zone, I remember I only learned to do that because I was doing, which we'll get to this later, I'm sure, I was doing a folk dance, like not interactive thing, but I was doing a folk dance, like they were performing a folk dance at a concert or like a spring showcase. And it was like rehearsal, and they were all just raising their hands like in the gym, like, I don't have a partner. And it was like chaos. And I was running like low on like rehearsal time. And I was like, I need a better fix for this. And then I was like, you know what? There's a zone. Anytime you don't have a partner in this show, you go there. And if someone shows up, you be with them. And that's it. Boy, girl, I don't care. And then that fixed that. And then I was like, okay, well, we're just going to keep that, because that cuts down on my time immensely.
Yeah, so I'd love to kind of dive in a little bit, briefly talking about that, what you were just talking about there, because I do, the last couple of years, I've done a third grade folk dance night instead of our traditional concert. So I'm curious, do you do something similar, or kind of what was your experience with that?
Yeah, so not this last year was our first year doing this, but we, the end of the year is so busy with like end of year testing and just like all the things that come up, graduations, like all the different things. And so at our school, we have a band program, we have a theater program, we have dance, we have music, like we have a lot of arts. And it's like, how are we supposed to all have our own night to do all this? Like, it's just not going to happen. And so last year we decided to do like a spring arts showcase. And so we turn like the whole school gets like decorated, like with whatever the theme is, and it gets decorated. And we have all these different, like we have food trucks come in for like families to come eat, like in between stuff. We have like an MC that says like dance is happening in the auditorium at 7 and theater is happening at 8 and elementary music K-2 is happening in the gym. We do it in the gym because of the folk dancing. And so like no art is doing anything at the same time. And then also there's all the art being shown off, like elementary art is just displayed all throughout, and like high school art does like a black tie, like gala type affair. It's really, really cute. But last year we started doing it and I was like, okay, well, what am I going to do with them in the gym? Because like, I also wanted to not necessarily focus on singing, because for Christmas, we do like a huge like Christmas show. It's like all singing because it's like Christmas carols and telling the story of Jesus, because I work at a private school. And so I was like, okay, I want to showcase other facets, because they also like they've been singing so much, like I want to show other things. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll have them do like some sort of fun activity. Like I've done like an RDL made a parachute thing before, and I've done like bucket drums and like other things. But I wanted to do dance because I was like, we do so much dance in our classroom. Like I want the parents to see. And so I started doing one folk dance for each grade level. So they would perform that for their parents. And then at the end, which was my favorite part, we would bring the parents down to meet with their kid, and we would teach a dance for them to all do together. So for like K-2 this year, I did Sasha with K-2. And then for 3-5, I did one called Kings and Queens, which was really fun. But yeah, they practice it in the classroom, like with a partner, but then I invite their parents down and we do it in like 5 minutes or less, because, there's like hundreds of kids and their parents doing this, and then we just put the music on and the kids know what to do, so they should help their parents, which they did, and that is the best thing ever. All the parents are just so happy, the kids are so happy, they're all having a blast, they're dancing around, like this is the best thing ever. Like I cried the first time we did it because I was like, this is beautiful. It's so fabulous. But yeah, so we did that again this year. It was literally just this Friday, last Friday the past. And I'm still honestly recovering because I did way too much, because I do way too much every time. I had to top the first year. But anyway, that was what I did for that. And so now they do a folk dance to show their parents, and I do it of like varying degrees. And then we do the big interactive one at the end. And I would ultimately love to do like a folk dance night where parents and students get to do this all together. But we might not get to do that just because, there's only so many nights and there's so many things. And since my school is K-12, there's like a lot of other things to have nights. But yeah, that's my little show stuff.
I love that. So I have some podcasts that I've recorded on how I do those as well. So we'll put those in the show notes of this episode, so you can check those out as well. But Rainy, I would love for you to share some of your favorite resources or websites or whatever. Basically, if someone is wanting to dive in and get started or take it to the next level, what are some things you would recommend or places that you would like them to check out?
Yeah. So for one, if you have any sort of like local ORF chapter or any local or like town workshop or like the state ones, because I know a lot of places have those. Most of the time there will be some sort of folk dance, not always, but there will be something there. So I always recommend doing that if you want the actual like in-person experience, because I think that's also important to not just learn it without doing it yourself. So if you can do it, then that's great. If you can't necessarily right now because of where you're at or whatever the circumstance is, then of course, New England Dance Masters is like a must, because they are fantastic. Their books are fabulous. I will say, like Bryson, as you said earlier, the terminology and like the way they say things in there, sometimes I'm like, I don't really know what you're telling me to do here. So just keep that in mind. But
it can take a little bit of decoding.
I can take a little bit of decoding to figure it out, but they are fabulous. They have like a million books, and they not only do folk dance, they have like singing ones and they have movement ones. So that's a great one. Rhythmically Moving is another one that I absolutely love, by Phyllis Weichart. Her CDs, like the music she chooses for like the different movements, are just great. And the book itself like I love that it breaks down like not even grade level, but just like by development, like in it, like, oh, these are easy ones, and then you progress to here and then you advance to here. And so that's been a great lifesaver. for me. But as far as other ones, I love Santa Longden because she focuses hardcore on cultural ones. So like ones from all other parts of the world. Like I think there was one that I did a year ago with my students from Zambia, I'm pretty sure, or I can't remember for sure. But I just love that she doesn't do just the ones that are from like, North America and things. Like you're learning from these other cultures. She always tries to make sure that like she explains how they do it or like why and like how it came to be. And so I really, really love her for that. But then also just on YouTube, Bowtie Music, he's like, you need to be following because and now he has a website where he categorized it all for you. So you can go on there and you can look up circle dances, long waist set dances, older kid dances. It's a gold mine for music teachers. So please check that out. And then the other one is Matthew Stensrud, because he is really great at all sorts of movement. He was fabulous in the pandemic with teaching how to adapt to doing dance and stuff when you can't actually touch. And he was someone that I saw at a workshop in person. And he's where I actually learned how to teach a folk dance because he taught us exactly the way he teaches his students. And that was the best thing ever because I just took everything in. I was like, okay, I need to do this and I need to stop saying this. And I need if I could just follow him around all day, I feel like I'd learn so much. He's just so fabulous. But yeah, those are great ones to start out with. The YouTube ones, especially because those are free, so we love a good free moment. And then the other ones, just, get them when you can, see if your school will purchase them for you. But I think they're really great curriculum to have in your classroom.
Those are all great resources. Speaking of great resources, you are actually going to be leading a masterclass inside that music teacher community, which is our membership for professional development. So can you tell us a little bit about the masterclass that you're going to be doing and what our members can expect to get out of it?
Sure. So I'm, going to say all these things and more. I'm kidding. I titled my masterclass The Art of Folk Dancing, and I really want this masterclass to just condense folk dance as best as we can into an hour because, folk dance takes more than that, but I'm going to try my best. Essentially of just the 101 behind it. Why do we teach it? What are best practices? Where do you start if you have literally no experience, like you're walking in not knowing how to do anything, versus what do you do if you have some experience? What if your children don't have any? How do you incorporate them into performances and informances? How to identify folk dances and make sure that you're not only pulling finding cultural resources as well, and then actually giving some concrete examples for younger students, older students, and all the different things from there, materials, all the stuff. I just basically want anyone that watches this masterclass to come away with the knowledge to feel comfortable that they could utilize folk dance in their classroom as soon as tomorrow, and not necessarily knowing that it'll be a huge success yet, but knowing okay, I have the tools. I could take this really simple dance and I could do Sasha, which is a great scattered mixer dance, and I could do that with my kids tomorrow and we'd be okay. So that is the end goal for this.
I love that. So our members will be getting information about how to join that live. If you are listening in the future, hello future, that replay will be added to our growing professional development library. So you can always check out that replay as we go on. Now, Rainy, before I would be remiss if I didn't ask this question, because I know you've talked a lot about how you don't like just doing the North American folk dances because there's so much more out there. And I agree. And there's so many good ones out there. How would you recommend we really make sure that we're ensuring inclusivity and cultural sensitivity when we're selecting and teaching folk dances that might be from a tradition or a culture that's different than our own?
Yeah. So yeah, that's definitely a hard one. Definitely the reason, well, first off, it's just important in general to make sure that you are doing something because first off, not all your students are from, where they're from. There's different places. Like some of my students are from Mexico. I have a student from Russia. I have another student that's from the Czech Republic. I have a couple, because my school is international, students come here from all over. So we actually have an international banquet every year, and it's actually really awesome because there's so many cultures represented. like, I think I have a student from Croatia too. There's just so many, but it's really important because what's great is that if you're possibly able to find one that happens to be from where another student is from, maybe they know it. Which one time that did happen, I picked some folk dance. I can't even remember what it was, and one of my students was like, "That's one we did back in my hometown," and it was the best thing ever. And they were just like, "Oh my gosh, I feel so seen," which was great. So that's one thing. That's the reason I do it, is because you want to be able to make sure that like you're making each student feel seen and heard. It's also just important, because you want to make sure that you're exposing them to it, because where I don't feel like they're going to get this exposure as much in other ways, and music is just an easy open door to do that with, especially like exposing your students to music that they otherwise wouldn't hear in other places, and just getting to experience how other parts of the world view dance as opposed to us, because there are some folk dances I've taught from other parts of the world, and I'm like, these actions are extremely different, but you know what, we're going to go for it because this is what they do, and we try our very best. But I also do come across to them with the knowledge that like I don't know everything, and like I do research as best I can to make sure that like I'm not saying things that are not appropriate, or that I'm not disrespecting a culture or other things. But like sometimes, Miss Barton's gonna get it wrong. Like there was one time I was teaching, I think it was Sasha for the longest time, and I was saying that it was a Russian dance because it was from, and that they call, that's a nickname for Alexander and Alexandra in Russia. And I actually read, I think it was from Santa Longden recently, that she was like, there's actually no proof that it's from Russia. It's actually possibly from Denmark, or there was like some other place, and they were like, it came to be because of this, all this stuff. And I was like, oh, but that's not even like the worst thing that I could have said, but it was just like, I was just taking what I had heard, and I hadn't really like dug into it. So I think it's important to just also try your best, which also you won't always find the information, like you just won't. I will say though, Santa Longden really has helped with this, because she does a lot of the research for you. And so that's ultimately where I pull most of my cultural dances from, because I wouldn't even know where to look honestly otherwise. But I just try to make sure every student feels represented, do my research, let them know, that there's always more you can learn about other cultures, and just that's really all I try to do. But I don't feel like I always get it 100%.
And we never will. And that's the real thing. I think it comes down to try your best. And like in many things, when you know better, do better. Because again, we're going to make mistakes. We're human, and that's just how life is.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I know it's important, and I always try to do better. Like you said, know better, do better. And I will, it's just ever since I had that one time with the student that was like, oh, like you did a dance from my folk town or my hometown. That's been really helpful. And then there was another time that I said something, and the student's like, that is not true. And I went, you probably right. I probably messed up. You're right. So teach me your ways, tiny children. But yeah, it's important. So I try to prioritize it.
Well, Rainy, we could continue this conversation so many different ways, and we can go so much deeper. I'm really looking forward to watching your masterclass, because I love folk dances, especially this time of year when the kids get a little bit wild. So you can, for those of you that are members, you'll be able to log in your members portal and get that. If you would like to join us this month, you can head over to thatmusicteacher.com/TMT community, or check out the link in the bio as well. Rainy, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for doing our masterclass coming up soon.
Thanks for having me. I'm just so excited. Folk dances is like my favorite thing to talk about. So we will have a great time.
For sure. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of That Music Podcast. It would mean the world to us if you were to leave a review wherever you're listening now. Send us an email, hello@thatmusicteacher.com. Let us know what you're liking. Let us know what you want to hear more of. And in case nobody has told you lately, thank you so much for making a difference in the lives of the students that you teach.